The tobacco and cigarette industry, a supply chain and economic analysis.
The first step in the supply chain of cigarettes is on-farm production of tobacco. Every year, a farmer is allotted growing acres predetermined by the contracting company over the winter. This amount can rise or fall from year to year. Using the set acres, around the middle of March, the farmer will plant their greenhouse, where the plants will remain for about 2 months to grow and develop to increase their survival rate outdoors. Then, in the end of May, the tobacco is planted into the field. Roughly 2 weeks after planting, the farmer will re-walk his whole fields, replanting any plants that did not survive this transition to maximize the plant to acre ratio. The tobacco is given water and fertilizer whenever needed as it grows. Around the middle to end of July, the farmer will top their tobacco, which is the removal of the flower, which makes the tobacco send more nutrients to the leaves instead of the flower. A few weeks later, a similar process known as suckering is done, which is the removal of the suckers from the plant. Tobacco matures in stages, with the bottom leaves maturing first, so the harvest will take place from the beginning of August at the sand leaves or bottom leaves until early October when the top leaves, the tips, mature. It is then cured at high heat for 10 days, which you can see in the picture of Matt's grandfather placing the leaves in the kiln. Then, the farmer sorts the leaves, keeping only high-quality leaves through a process called stripping. The final product is then placed into 800-pound bales and stored until shipment. Each step in the growing of tobacco adds value to the final product. Tobacco requires extremely sandy soil, which is why most of Ontario's tobacco is grown in Norfolk County, which is also the highest producing area of tobacco across Canada.
Now we are going to talk about the economic side of tobacco production. The general trend for prices within the tobacco industry is that there's been an increase in prices. In the late 80s and 90s, this increase in prices can be attributed to an increase in demand when smoking was popular. However, more recently, the increase in prices are attributed to decreases in supply, creating a shortage and resulting in price increases. The general trend for the production of tobacco is that it has decreased throughout the years. These decreases in production are a result of decreases in demand in the buyout in 2008 when many older farmers saw an opportunity to get out of the tobacco industry and thereby supply less tobacco. One interesting thing about the tobacco industry is that it was supply managed up until 2008. Now this has many different economic effects. The producers will set an amount that they feel is right they should charge. This will ultimately determine how much is supplied to the industry. However, for supply management to work properly, there needs to be an inelastic demand so that the consumers will still consume the same amount that they originally did, which will result in more revenue gained by the producers.
Contracting companies are a branch of the primary manufacturing companies who work first-hand with the farmer to aid in any needs in their production. Once the tobacco at the farm has been baled and is ready to be sold, contractors will go to each individual farm and the product is given a grade and a predetermined price. Each grade is based upon color, maturity, size, texture, and what parts of the plant are used. The farmer then has the option to accept or deny the offer at hand. If the offer is accepted, the farmer and contractor agree on a set of terms that benefit both parties. These terms are specific to each individual farmer and what is expected from them, so terms can vary from contract to contract. Contracts are a way to provide a security mechanism to settle any controversy that may come about between either party. For example, a term that can vary between contracts is what is expected from the farmer. Some contracts state that the farmer must provide an estimate on the quantity of tobacco he plans on producing, while others require an estimate on how many acres he plans on planting. Contracts provide a reassurance for both the farmer and the contractor, but also provide a straight connection with the farmer to get in touch with the processing company. Upon arrival at the processing company, the tobacco is sent to be graded once again. After it has been graded, it is sent through a series of conditioning cylinders that add moisture into the leaves by forced hot air and steam. After the conditioning cylinders, the tobacco is sent to the threshers, where the leaves are broken up into its different components of the lamina, stem, and the remaining unthreshed leaf. Classifiers then separate these components and send them off for further processing. The lamina and the stem are sent to separate processing lines because the stem must obtain a higher moisture content to increase its palatability. The mixture of lamina that comes from different cycles of the conditioning cylinders then heads to dryers, which ensures that the moisture content is uniform between all components. The tobacco is then packaged into cases and stored to age for several years, which will improve its flavor. The main concern and priority of the processing company is to obtain optimal moisture levels to improve the palatability and stem length of the tobacco leaves. To ensure that the ideal moisture content is reached, there are sensors that are placed at the entrances and exits of all conditioning and drying chambers to achieve quality and consistent moisture levels. The stem of the leaf receives a higher moisture content of 40% to increase its palatability, while the lamina moisture level averages around 20%. While tobacco is packaged and sent to storage, the moisture content is dried to about 6 to 8% so that it does not spoil within the time it has to age. This converts it into a more usable form and increases the palatability before it is sent to the primary manufacturer.
Once the tobacco leaves have been processed, they are then ready for the next step in our supply chain, which is purchasing by primary cigarette manufacturers. There are currently 3 primary cigarette manufacturers that are known globally. The first is the British American Tobacco, second is Philip Morris International, and third is Japan Tobacco International. All 3 operate similarly in how they manufacture cigarettes. Once the processed tobacco arrives at these manufacturing plants, it is inspected for quality and carefully blended with other tobacco and necessary ingredients. Various food type ingredients and flavorings are added to get various types of cigarettes, typically American style. These additives are added to balance taste, replace sugars lost during the curing process, and to give each individual brand their unique flavor and aroma. The final additives include ingredients to control moisture, protect from microbial degradation, and act as binders and fillers. Next, the cigarette blends are rolled or sent to secondary manufacturers. Filter, paper, and type of filter are chosen based on the effect it will have on sensory strength and smoke yield, based on consumer preferences. The process of manufacturing cigarettes is mostly all automated now, with cut tobacco, paper, and filters continuously fed into the cigarette making machines. The various types and blends are continuously monitored through a highly technical process. A computer tracking system tracks the runs to ensure blends are of optimal quality. It also tracks moisture content, which is a crucial part of the tobacco production. Each cigarette is then automatically quality controlled, as quality is of top priority for these companies. Packing machines then place the cigarettes into the familiar brand packs that consumers know and love. Having these primary manufacturing companies adds value to the product by creating brands that consumers can recognize, know, and trust. These manufacturers create a product that is continuously consistent with what people associate with each type of brand. Many primary manufacturers will contract out to secondary manufacturers. These companies will receive the specifically blended tobacco for rolling and packaging. The first secondary manufacturer is Imperial Tobacco. They are the largest manufacturer in Canada and account for 51.2% of the market share. Imperial Tobacco has been owned by the British American Tobacco since 2000. Their most popular brands are Du Maurier, Players, Peter Jackson, Matinee, and Medallion. The second secondary manufacturing company in Canada is Rothmans, Benson & Hedges. They account for about 33.5% of the market share in 2012. RB&H are owned by Philip Morris International since 2008. The most popular brands that are manufactured by this company are Canadian Classics, Next, No. 7, Accord, and Quebec Classic, and their best-known brand, Marlboro. The final secondary manufacturing company is JTI McDonald. They are the third largest in Canada and account for 14.8% of the market share in 2012. They are fully owned by the Japan Tobacco International since 1999. Their most popular brands are Export A and McDonald.
Distribution centers are not cigarette specific. They receive a variety of products in bulk and send a few of each kind to each outlet. The Tobacco Retailers Inspection Program has rules set in place to ensure that the profit from the industry is going into the right pockets. Contraband tobacco products take away approximately $750 million in tax revenue yearly, showing the importance of this program. The added cost of having tobacco products distributed is incorporated into the final retail cost of the product itself. Transportation is the way of getting tobacco from each step in the production process to the next. This can be via ship, plane, train, or truck depending on where it is going. Transportation begins from the farm to the contracting company, where 52 bales weighing in at 800 pounds each are piled into a transport truck. They are packed tightly to ensure no damage from movement can be inflicted on the leaves. Next, it moves to the primary manufacturer, where it is often across the border. From here, it goes to the secondary manufacturer, which could be located anywhere globally. It then goes to distribution centers and stores. The value added for transportation of the product to where it can be bought by consumers is extremely high. The product would have no value if it was not in an area where consumers could access the supply.
The next step in our supply chain is retail. There has been a recent decline in the consumption of cigarettes with the rise of new generations, scientific studies, and new innovations. Most cigarettes are sold in convenient locations such as convenience-type stores and gas stations. This creates added value to the product as it is readily accessible to much of the population and customers over the age of 19 and has consistent access by retailers. Many of the younger population are now concerned with the health-related issues associated with cigarettes and are choosing to turn to the many other smoke-free options that exist, such as e-cigarettes and vapes, or other now legal drugs such as marijuana that offer the same smoking experience with less negative side effects.
Now let's look at the economic side of the retail of cigarettes. The general trend for quantity demanded is that it has been decreasing throughout the years, whereas the general trend for price is that it has been increasing throughout the years. Now this increase in price is greater than the inflation rate, which means that some sort of external factor has caused the prices to go up. For example, an increase in input costs. Now the reason for the decrease in the quantity demanded is because there's been a change in preferences, and the age groups have made it socially unacceptable to be smoking cigarettes, which deteriorates some people's preference towards smoking cigarettes, resulting in decreases in demand. One metric that economists use all the time to measure a product's responsiveness to price changes is its own price elasticity of demand. Interestingly, the own price elasticity of demand of cigarettes has gone from a number that is less than 1 to a number that is greater than 1. This signifies a shift in inelastic demand to elastic demand, and this has major implications on different economic policies such as supply management and taxation. This shift means that people will become more sensitive to price changes of the product. Thereby, if there's an increase in price, people are less likely to buy the product. There are many different factors which will have different effects on supply and demand and ultimately shift the market equilibrium. For example, taxes will cause consumers to have to pay more than the market equilibrium and producers to receive less than the market equilibrium. The rest of this revenue is transferred to the government, and some is lost as a deadweight loss to society. Elasticity of demand also plays different roles in how taxes are implicated. For example, with an inelastic demand, there will be minimal changes on purchasing behavior, which will result in the government receiving a large amount of revenue. This revenue is allocated towards support programs, research, and healthcare to help the citizens who utilize these products. On the other hand, elastic demands will discourage people from purchasing because they will respond from the increase in price by purchasing less of the product. Another factor which can have effects on supply and demand are substitute products, and a good example of a substitute product for cigarettes is the use of e-cigarettes. They claim to be healthier and a cheaper alternative, which can affect the demand of cigarettes altogether, thereby shifting the equilibrium down and reducing the price.
Here's a real-life example of the tobacco to cigarette supply chain. First, the tobacco would start on a farm. In this example, let's say in Langton, Ontario, in the heart of tobacco country in Norfolk County. Then the tobacco would move to the contractor. A real example of a contractor is Alliance One Tobacco International, located in Delhi, Ontario. Then it would move to a processor, which is also, in this case, owned by Alliance One International, but their office is in Wilson, North Carolina. From the processor, the tobacco would then move to the manufacturer. In this case, it would be Philip Morris USA, which is located in Richmond, Virginia. From the manufacturer, it would then go to a distributor. So let's say it would go to the Canadian Tire Gas Bar, their distribution center in Mississauga, Ontario. From the distribution center, it will get loaded onto transport trucks, usually by independent truck companies, and then sent to Canadian Tires all across Ontario for us all to purchase.
Even though the tobacco industry has been on the decline for several decades, there is still a chance for the tobacco industry to come back. Farmers just need to be responsive to changes in consumer preferences and be able to meet these needs. We thank you for watching our presentation.